You're tuned into Collateral Damage, the military families FAP and IDC leave behind. Voices have been altered, because in this system, honesty has a price. Let's jump into episode 14. Army headquarters knew about Family Advocacy Center misconduct. Here's what they did.
Have you ever imagined a situation so dire, so deeply troubling, that you turn to the very system designed to protect you?
Yeah, like the place you're supposed to go for help.
Exactly. Only to find yourself dismissed, maybe even labeled the aggressor, and then impossibly instructed to return to the source of the harm.
It sounds like something out of a nightmare, doesn't it? But it happens.
It's a scenario that seems unthinkable, yet for some, it's a terrifying reality.
And this isn't just, one individual struggle. It's really a critical, kind of harrowing case study in how institutional systems, the ones designed for protection, can actually inflict profound trauma themselves. We're talking about the severe impact when the very foundation meant to support, to intervene, and, well, to ensure safety, instead amplifies the danger and just completely betrays trust.
And that's our mission today. We're diving deep into the harrowing journey of Sarah, a licensed counselor, as she navigated the Army's Family Advocacy Program, or FAP.
Right.
Our focus is really going to be on the shocking failure of Army headquarters to truly engage with her concerns, her documented policy violations, and ultimately sending her back to the originating base, Fort Rucker.
Despite glaring evidence of systemic harm, which is key here.
Absolutely. So we're going to pick apart the sources Sarah provided, detailed appeals, email exchanges with top Army officials, internal documents to understand these critical failures.
And maybe more importantly, what they mean for you, the listener, in recognizing when these kinds of systems break down.
Okay, so to really grasp the gravity of this institutional failure, let's start at the beginning. We need to understand Sarah's initial, incredibly courageous steps to seek help.
Yeah, because she wasn't just running from something.
No, she came to FAP not just for her own safety, but she was actively trying to secure help for her estranged husband, Derek. He's an Army veteran, a Purple Heart recipient, diagnosed with PTSD and TBI.
And Sarah herself is a child and adolescent counselor. The sources show she genuinely believed in finding solutions, in the good in people, even in this incredibly difficult situation.
That really stands out.
It does. And what's also remarkable here is the meticulous way Sarah engaged through official Army channels. Like, she consistently followed every protocol. The sources show she made a restricted report to FAP about sexual coercion. She also reported discovering child exploitation materials on Derek's hard drive. She told her domestic violence advocate, who immediately notified Army CID.
Their Criminal Investigation Division.
Right, and she sought support from the chaplain, too. Her intent was always clear: address these severe issues head-on, ensure safety for everyone involved.
And she even had a plan for him, right, for getting help.
Exactly. She proactively proposed that Derek attend a 3-week intensive program at Tulane University's Brain Institute. It was a program he was already screened and approved for.
So she wasn't just pointing fingers, she was offering a concrete solution for his needs.
Precisely. She was simply trying to facilitate his access to vital treatment while he was still active duty.
Meanwhile, the documentation Sarah provided paints a deeply disturbing picture of Derek's behavior.
Yeah, the sources detail some really chilling things.
Like direct threats. Him telling Sarah, "I think about killing you," and then just brushing it off as a fleeting thought.
Just a fleeting thought. Unbelievable.
And there was physical intimidation, too. Things like slamming on the brakes at full speed in the car, causing Sarah's seatbelt to lock up, pushing her.
And property damage. Lots of it. Punching holes in walls, breaking his own phone, a shelf Sarah had painted, a TV. It's a clear pattern.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Sarah's attempts to set, just basic healthy boundaries were consistently met with rapid escalation.
Oh, absolutely. The sources clearly reveal Derek's pattern of DARVO. That's deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. It's a classic tactic.
So when she sought help, what happened?
He'd accuse her of trying to ruin his career. Or he'd falsely claim she was, holding him hostage when she simply asked for a calm car environment after the brake slamming incident.
Wow.
And crucially, Sarah provided FAP with overwhelming evidence. We're talking a 322-page binder. Financial records, counseling notes, polygraph results confirming her financial integrity.
Because he accused her of financial misconduct, right?
He did. A completely fabricated claim about stealing $100,000. She had polygraphs proving that wasn't true. She even had character statements attesting to her integrity.
So this wasn't a case of, he said, she said with no proof.
Not at all. It was an abundance of proof. She documented everything.
Okay, so given this mountain of evidence, this compelling documentation from Sarah, how did Fort Rucker's local FAP respond?
Well, this is where the story takes a truly infuriating turn.
Despite Sarah's exhaustive efforts, Fort Rucker's FAP made a determination so shocking I actually had to reread it in the sources. They labeled her the offender of emotional partner abuse.
Her, the victim, who came asking for help and safety.
Yes. And to make matters worse, she was never given specific details of these supposed abuses. How can you defend yourself against vague accusations?
You can't. It makes a fair defense utterly impossible. And this isn't just a misjudgment, right? It's a terrifying glimpse into how power dynamics within these systems can just weaponize bureaucracy against the very people seeking protection.
How could they even get to that conclusion with all her evidence?
That's the million-dollar question. The sources highlight profound shortcomings, just critical failures. FAP simply dismissed Sarah's detailed documentation. They accepted Derek's unverified claims like that fabricated spreadsheet.
The one about the $100,000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And get this, they even misinterpreted Sarah's stress-induced migraines, a clear physical result of the trauma she was enduring, as somehow being a pattern of abuse against Derek.
Wait, her migraines were abuse against him?
That's what the FAP conclusion implied. It's staggering. And they also shockingly ignored Derek's own self-admissions.
Admissions he made himself.
Yes. Found in his VA disability statement and even a handwritten worksheet where he acknowledged his own aggression, his controlling behaviors, struggles with trust. He even listed behaviors he knew he needed to stop, like slamming doors and throwing objects. FAP had this.
But they ignored it.
Ignored it or dismissed it. Either way, the result was the same.
And what's incredibly frustrating, too, is that Fort Rucker's FAP completely disregarded Sarah's consistent pleas for Derek to actually get help.
That Tulane program.
Yeah, she explicitly asked, hey, can he attend this intensive Tulane University Brain Institute program, the one he was already approved for? And the answer?
Dismissed. Just dismissed out of hand.
It shows such a fundamental misunderstanding, maybe even disregard for trauma-informed care.
Absolutely. It wasn't just a misstep. It was a shocking failure. They abandoned a service member who clearly needed help. By failing to intervene, ignoring his documented mental health issues, PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, and his own admissions of aggression.
They discharged a man they knew was violent.
Without providing any services. This not only put Sarah in more danger, it also completely failed Derek himself by denying him access to crucial treatment he was already set up for.
It's a systemic failure on so many levels, right there at the local base.
Exactly. Multiple fronts.
So, feeling utterly failed, even betrayed by Fort Rucker, Sarah, incredibly, didn't give up. She took her fight higher.
To the top.
She sent formal complaints, follow-up emails to high-ranking Army and DoD Family Advocacy Program leaders, people with serious titles. And she reached out to congressional offices, the Inspector General,
Mr. Gregory T. O'Connor at the IG's office, Dr. Lulita Allen, the DoD FAP director, Dr. Cynthia Taylor, the Soldier and Family Well-Being Branch Chief at IMCOM FAPM. She went to the people supposedly in charge of oversight.
And she wasn't vague. She meticulously detailed Fort Rucker FAP's significant violations of policy, the unjust offender designation she received, and importantly, their clear bias towards Derek because he was active duty.
Her documentation of the local FAP's failures was just exhaustive. She identified, I think the sources said, at least 14 specific policy violations.
14.
Yeah. And she provided direct evidence of Derek's abuse. Again, the confirmed child exploitation materials discovery, his deceptive porn use things FAP had either ignored or dismissed entirely.
She really emphasized that this FAP determination against her only came after she started setting boundaries, right? Not because she was actually abusive.
Exactly. She framed it as basically retaliation disguised as an official finding.
So,
And she laid out all the evidence for headquarters. This wasn't just a complaint. It was a detailed report of systemic failure at the installation level.
okay, so she pours all this energy into appealing to the highest levels. She waits weeks for what Army headquarters calls a careful review. What was the result? What did the Soldier and Family Well-Being Branch Chief, Dr. Cynthia Taylor, tell her?
Well, after those weeks of careful review, Sarah was informed her review was complete. And the solution?
Get ready for this.
She was instructed to submit a second reconsideration request.
Okay. To whom? Surely not.
Oh, yes. To the very same FAP office at Fort Rucker that had initially mishandled her case and caused her such profound harm.
No. That can't be right. They told her to go back to the source of the problem, the people she just documented as violating policy.
That was the official instruction from headquarters.
How does that even make sense? It's circular.
This is where it gets truly, deeply troubling, because it highlights an astonishing institutional failure, or maybe refusal, to address a blatant conflict of interest.
Sarah must have pointed that out.
Oh, she did. Her response captured it perfectly. The sources quote her, saying, essentially, being sent back to the same people who mishandled my case, violated procedures, and re-traumatized me is not a reasonable solution. At this point, it feels like an extension of the harm, not a path to resolution.
She called it an extension of the harm. Wow.
And she's right. This insistence on keeping the review localized, despite documented serious systemic failures at that location, it effectively denies justice. It just perpetuates the institutional trauma Sarah was already drowning in.
It feels like headquarters just didn't want to deal with it or admit that one of their installations messed up so badly.
It certainly looks that way. It's like a closed loop, either by design or perhaps charitably by profound oversight. But the effect is the same. No accountability, no real review.
So, did Sarah push back on this? Did she ask about, any other mechanism?
She did. She pressed further. She asked if there was actually a designated way within the Department of Defense to formally report these kinds of installation-level policy violations when the local chain of command is the problem.
A way to bypass the biased local office, essentially.
Exactly. And the answer she got back, this time from a DoD FAP director, Dr. Lulita Allen, was stark and frankly chilling.
What did she say?
Basically, currently there is no formal process within the DoD to report policy violations directly.
Wait, no formal process at the DoD level for reporting when local installations are breaking DoD's own rules.
That's what the director stated. No direct formal process.
So, what does that even mean for someone like Sarah? Or anyone finding themselves in that situation? How is oversight supposed to work?
Well, according to the response Sarah got, oversight relies on things like site visits, external reports, indirect mechanisms. It reveals a critical, gaping policy hole.
The huge hole.
Yeah, it means the DoD can set these overarching policies, but there's no direct pathway for victims or advocates to sound the alarm when those policies are clearly, demonstrably not being followed on the ground.
It makes you wonder, how widespread could these issues be if there's no easy way to report it upwards?
It really does, especially when you connect it to other findings. There was a 2024 Government Accountability Office report, the GAO report. It highlighted numerous issues with FAP across the services.
And what did it say about the Army specifically?
It explicitly stated that the Army was, and I'm quoting here, the worst at failing to follow its own FAP policy.
The worst. So Sarah's case, while maybe extreme in its details, seems to fit into a documented pattern of non-compliance within the Army's FAP.
It strongly suggests this isn't just an isolated incident, sadly. It points towards a systemic breakdown in accountability, starting at the installation level, and clearly, based on Sarah's experience, extending right up to headquarters.
The impact of these institutional failures on Sarah herself, it was devastating, wasn't it? It wasn't just procedural frustration.
Oh, absolutely not. The impact was profound, cascading through her entire life. Her professional counseling licensure was threatened because of the unfounded offender label.
Which could ruin her career.
Completely.
Yeah.
Her plans to adopt a child were put in jeopardy. She experienced severe stress-related medical issues, we mentioned the migraines, but likely much more, significant financial strain.
She had to resign from her job, right?
Yes, she was forced to resign from her private practice. And on top of all that, remember how she wasn't told the specifics of the allegations against her.
Right, the impossible defense situation?
Well, she filed Freedom of Information Act requests, FOIA requests, to get those details, to find out what she was even accused of. Ignored and delayed. Just stonewalled, leaving her completely in the dark while carrying this damaging official label.
It's just layer upon layer of institutional betrayal.
It really is. And it's easy to get lost in the bureaucratic details here, the policy numbers, the titles. But we need to pause and consider the human cost. Sarah's case isn't just about a flawed process. It's a stark human example of how institutional inertia, this refusal to intervene meaningfully at the highest levels, can completely derail a person's life, financially, professionally, emotionally.
That lack of transparency, the refusal by headquarters to address the obvious conflict of interest at Fort Rucker, It just trapped her.
Exactly. Trapped her in this circular, biased process. It denied her any real avenue for recourse or resolution within the very system that was supposed to help.
But here's something truly striking, almost validating in a grim way. Sarah's claims, the ones FAP ignored, and headquarters essentially rubber-stamped by sending her back. They are being validated now.
By outside authorities.
Yes, by external civilian authorities. She now has an order of protection against Derek, issued by a civilian court.
A court that presumably did look at the evidence of abuse.
The very evidence FAP ignored. And it's not just the courts. The local sheriff's office is also actively investigating the abuse allegations that FAP dismissed.
Wow. So the civilian legal system is seeing what the military system refused to see.
Pretty much. And this highlights a crucial, almost unbelievable disconnect, doesn't it?
It's staggering. When civilian courts and law enforcement recognize the severity of the abuse, when they issue protective orders based on the evidence, it just throws the FAP failure into such sharp relief.
It shows the extent of their failure to protect Sarah and also to hold Derek accountable within their own system.
It really raises a deeply provocative question for you, the listener, doesn't it? Think about this. What does it say about a system that's specifically designed to protect military families? When it takes an outside civilian authority to finally validate the victim's truth and provide the basic safety that the internal military system utterly failed to deliver.
Damning question.
It really is.
So this whole deep dive into Sarah's experience, focusing especially on that failure at the headquarters level, it forces us to confront a really difficult but vital question. If a service member's spouse, who is herself a trained mental health professional, someone with expensive documentation, someone who knew how to navigate systems, if she can get caught in such a damaging loop of institutional failure.
What does that mean for countless other victims?
Exactly. People who might lack the resources or the specific knowledge or maybe just the sheer resilience to fight for their truth against such a monolithic system.
It's a deeply concerning thought, and it urges us to consider what true accountability looks like within these large organizations.
Right.
Is the focus sometimes more on, protecting the institution, avoiding blame, adhering rigidly to internal processes, even flawed ones? Does that sometimes overshadow the fundamental mission of care and protection, especially when it comes to the most vulnerable people involved?
It seems like that might have happened here.
It certainly raises an important question for you, the listener, to take away. How do we as a society ensure that systems designed to protect don't inadvertently become sources of further harm?
And what's our role in demanding that justice isn't just some abstract concept, but a lived reality for everyone, especially those relying on these systems for their very safety?
A crucial question indeed.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe as we have so many more stories to tell. This isn't about one person, it's about a broken system. Contact us if you'd like your story told.